Good evening and welcome to this week's Genesis Science Report. I'm David Rives, and coming up on tonight's show, I'll be sitting down with Dr. Guliuzza, a leading expert in biological design, as we examine the growing phenomenon of tuskless elephants in certain parts of Africa. Then later on, we'll be diving into the field of geology with Dr. Clarey for a thorough examination of a groundbreaking new study centered around the discovery of iron deposits that could potentially overturn long-held assumptions about Earth's geological timeline. But first, Einstein famously said, "Politics is more difficult than physics." Science should deal in the realm of truth. Now, a scientist's observation, hypothesis, experiments, analysis, and ultimate theory development all aim towards the revelation and proof of truth. In this episode of GSR, we dig through the weeds of our political landscape and the science that should ultimately support our understanding. Let's start by agreeing that scientists can certainly support politics in various ways. Scientists, after all, should be able to provide valuable expertise and evidence-based research that can inform policy decisions so that policies can actually be founded in reality, not just whims. But isn't this where all of it goes awry? The problem, of course, is the biases of politicians and then where their policies originate. Because, let's be honest, fake science is often the source. But science is supposed to be unbiased, right? Well, except when the mask slips. Take, for example, a recent position taken by the Scientific American magazine. For the second time in its 179-year history, they actually chose to endorse a political candidate, saying, quote, "We feel a responsibility to share what we know about how this election could shape the future of the U.S. science, health, education, and the environment. Our editors have evaluated Vice President's record and policy positions and compared them with former President, and the contrast is clear." Now, by the way, they say that this was only the second time in nearly 180 years that they had endorsed a candidate. Their first endorsement? Oh, it was in 2020. Their second just happened to be in 2024. Am I seeing a pattern here? So the editor made their political opinions clear regarding the choice of presidential candidates. The irony here of this, coming from a publication called Scientific American, that's too good to pass up, because let's just run through 4 areas of policy that are not just unscientific, but actually anti-science that is pushed as a part of her failed platform. Number 1, human biology recognizes the unique life of male and female genders. In fact, male and female genders are evidenced across all mammals. Yet, spoke at her city's 3rd annual march, where she was honored as having championed rights, which is clearly in opposition to scientific biology. Even her vice presidential candidate implemented a Minnesota state policy of putting feminine hygiene products in men's restrooms. To comment any further would not be fitting for a show like this. Reproduction is essential for the long-term survival of any species, but policies support the sterilization of minors through puberty blockers and radical surgeries, actually funded by you and me, the taxpayer no less. And they penalize people for speaking out against this insanity. They'll call them anti-trans and hateful. Now, if all of her party's policies were implemented, humankind would eventually die out for lack of reproduction. Now, let's talk about self-inflicted extinction. That's anti-science. Now, while political opinions may vary, science demonstrates that unique human life begins at conception, as human cells begin to reproduce immediately after fertilization. However, platforms supported expanding abortion access to full-term, perfectly viable children who could live independently of the mother. Let's talk about the implementation of petroleum as a generator of energy. It's completely changed the face of the globe over the last 100 years. That is a scientific fact. It has raised the standard of living in every country on Earth by leaps and bounds, and it's clear that gas and oil engines have been built upon scientific and technological breakthroughs that have been accrued since the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution. But this past failed campaign was completely on board for Agenda 2030 and its goal to transition away from so-called fossil fuels, focusing on things like solar, hydropower, wind power, and other green sources of energy, which it's a noble thing to strive to diversify energy sources. But here's the thing with this strategy. Its lack of connection to reality is truly astounding. In fact, it's so anti-science that it could actually send us back to the Dark Ages. Petroleum is a consistent source of energy, one which we have access to in abundance, while green power sources are many times inconsistent and inefficient. May be surprising to some, but the amount of wildlife killed by things like large windmills is staggering. And the irony is that these windmills have to be produced by factories using, guess what? Coal and petroleum. So let's pull back the curtain on all of this. Here's the Wizard of Oz for you, hiding in plain sight. None of these policies have anything to do with science. It is merely policy charading as science. The sad truth is that scientists that allow themselves to be hijacked by these delusions are truly only in it for prestige and money, and they sell their souls and their scientific integrity. Scientific American has left the realm of science for the second time in a few years, and it's turned its back on facts, on truth, and on the American people. Clearly, the American public has had enough. Even the editor's colleagues have had enough. Amidst widespread backlash, the editor has stepped down, which is good for real science, but that doesn't mean that Scientific American has ceased to support radical anti-science positions. So let's keep the new editors responsible. Make sure that everyone you know sees and shares this message. And the sad thing is that God's Word, well, it already gave us the basis for scientific truth. But you see, it's been rejected and replaced with pseudoscience. Let's get back to sanity. Let's get back to real science. Let's get back to truth. We're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Just outside Nashville, the Wonder Center and Science Museum, with a top 10 planetarium, kids' hands-on activities, the teen favorite 1 million volt musical Tesla show. It's worlds of fun for the entire family. Experience the wonder. Explore the science. Inspire curiosity. Embark on adventure. The Wonder Center and Science Museum.
Join us at the Wonder Center and Science Museum for this month's Unwrapped event, where we feature expert speakers presenting scientific and biblical discoveries.
It pays to learn history, folks.
We cannot create an aircraft even close to what these birds can do.
This changes the way we do biology.
Discounted tickets are available for an after-hours adventure, including museum admission with kids' hands-on activities, a planetarium movie, Tesla experience, and pre-show entertainment. Perfect for the whole family.
What you believe about the history of the world is going to affect the way that you study the world today.
You see a mathematical order here. You see the orthogonal lines. You see the repeating patterns.
You don't understand what it takes to make a cell. That's serious engineering.
Come be inspired as you learn. The evening presentation is free, but seating is extremely limited, so RSVP immediately at wondercenter.org.
Today we can just pick up our cell phone and call somebody across the world. Long before this, there were long-distance communications that have happened throughout history.
And you could see dozens of ships coming in that don't belong there. Light up that fire so that that can be seen miles away. If you're going to be defending against attackers, it's got to be able to pass the warning in a short amount of time.
On Wonders Without Number. Tune in to the Genesis Science Network Knowledge Block as you learn real, cutting-edge science, not evolutionary theories and agendas. Whether you're in junior or senior high, a homeschooler, or an adult looking for higher education, we bring you a fresh perspective each weekday. Our goal is to equip you with another block to build and strengthen your faith, giving you solid evidence. Join us each weekday at 11 a.m. Central. Welcome back to The Report. This week, our Genesis science question comes from Roland on YouTube. Roland says, atheist here. If God spoke the universe into existence some 6,000 years ago, has there been any progress from creation scientists as to how this actually happened? That is, how does an invisible, non-physical entity speak? And how does such speaking cause a universe, stars, planets, and life to come into existence when they did not exist beforehand? Thank you for the question, Roland. I appreciate the message. You are trying to explain the origin of the universe using universal physics and laws. You've actually fallen into this trap of basically diving into the mystery that most scientists avoid, especially on the naturalistic side of things. Because you see, it's actually impossible to explain the origin of matter from a naturalistic perspective. That means that you would actually have to create matter from nothing, which breaks scientific laws, like the laws of thermodynamics. We can't even begin to explain the origin of the universe from a natural perspective without using pseudo-scientific principles, saying that magically science broke its own rules. But now let's look at things from a biblical perspective. What if there is someone outside of the universe? What if this person who is outside of the universe, this entity outside of the universe, decided, hey, I will create a universe for everyone to live in. I will create mankind, I will create matter, I will create stars, galaxies, and so forth and so on. And he has the power to do this. All right, well, all of a sudden, universal laws don't apply. Now, you may say, well, David, that's appealing to supernatural deities. I would say absolutely. But that is what we read in the biblical creation narrative. When you look at it from a naturalistic point of view, you have to basically point to supernatural deities to explain the origin of matter, the origin of the first life, the origin of so much of what the universe is, and then the origin of the laws and physics that govern the universe. Did it all just happen by chance and all happen to perfectly, calculably come together? Well, if so, how? And how do you explain it via science? Because science tells us that life only comes from living things. So where's the first life form? You have to break a scientific law. You have to believe and point to supernatural, magical origins to create life from non-life, from a naturalistic point of view. And then you have to believe in supernatural, magical origins, or basically your own deities, to create a universe of matter from nothing at all. When we look at someone outside of the universe able to manipulate the laws, actually creating the laws of the universe, it's no surprise that he could speak and things would exist. Don't forget to share your questions with us on social media, or you can email them to comments@genesissciencenetwork.com. To learn more about this week's Q&A topic, check out this week's featured resource, Creation Basics and Beyond, by multiple PhD scientists. Now, fortunately, you don't need a doctorate in science to understand the basic lines of scientific evidence that surrounds the creation-evolution controversy, nor do you need a theological degree to understand the basic theology and the moral implications of creation. It's written and reviewed by experts. Creation Basics and Beyond offers a thorough introduction to the basic questions involved in the creation versus evolution debate. This book demonstrates that not only does the scientific evidence contradict evolutionary dogma, but it also confirms the biblical account of creation. Creation Basics and Beyond clearly shows that the Bible really is what it claims to be, the inspired word of the living God. You can pick up your copy at the Creation Superstore or by visiting creationsuperstore.com. And now it's time for the Kids Corner. And this week we are exploring the science behind different types of crystals. Now, if you're like me, you probably think rocks with colorful crystals are beautiful. We have a display here at the Wonder Center and Science Museum of many types of rocks, some of which have beautiful crystals. Now, one type of rock known as quartz looks a lot like big masses of crystals. Now, quartz crystals come in so many different sizes and colors, and they can be amazingly beautiful. Natural quartz in its pure form, it has no color. It's actually completely transparent, kind of like this little piece right here. Now, it looks a lot like glass, which should be no surprise, since quartz is simply a natural form of glass. Now, the different color varieties of quartz are the result of either chemical impurities or sometimes heat or radiation. But the most desired form of quartz, it's actually the variety known as amethyst. It's definitely my favorite. It can vary from a pale lavender to a very deep, dark purple. You can see how it just absolutely shines underneath the studio lights. Now, in the past, amethyst was as desirable and valuable as diamonds, as emeralds, as rubies. And while it's still highly sought after, enough amethyst has been found that specimens are much more affordable at this point. The purple color is the result of the inclusion of iron and a small amount of radiation. But our Creator has filled our earth with an incredible variety of beautiful creatures and objects, including crystals. And that's a strong indication that our God not only enjoys things of beauty, but He also loves to share that beauty with us. But sadly, throughout history, people often worshiped rocks like this instead of the Creator of those rocks. Even today, some people teach that, well, rock crystals, maybe they have special magical benefits. But that is making an idol out of an inanimate rock. While it's fine to enjoy the beauty that God has created, we should never resort to worshiping His creation, no matter how beautiful it may be. Like the idols of ancient times, this amethyst, well, it can't hear or speak or answer our prayers. So remember, when you're collecting, just enjoy the beauty and praise the Creator who has shared the wonders of His creation with us, including the beautiful amethyst. Coming up, I will be joined in studio by author, speaker, and president of the Institute for Creation Research, Dr. Randy Guliuzza. So stick around to catch this fascinating discussion as we investigate the growing phenomenon of tuskless elephants in Africa and explain why it's generated so much buzz in scientific circles. Next on the Genesis Science Report. Friends of Genesis Science Network, we started this channel to make an impact in the lives of both Christians and inquiring skeptics around the world. It has done that in unbelievable ways. Now, one of our viewers wrote, "I've been watching your channel for nearly a week now, and I would like you to know the blessing that it's been to me. I've never had the finances or the opportunity to attend a university, but I've been a believer for the last 37 years. Your channel has done more for my understanding of my faith than any book I've read save the Bible, and I feel like I'm finally able to attend the lecture classes I've always wanted to. Thank you so much for your ministry." I want to thank you for your generous support. GSN is no simple project and requires monthly commitments to keep it on the air. Please consider becoming a partner with us today. Just call 931-212-7990 or click Give on our website. We are making a difference. I'm David Rives, and you're watching the Genesis Science Network. The work of His hands. Let's look at photography of the Earth from space with a NASA astronaut.
We orbit the Earth 16 times a day. My cumulative time in space is 534 days, so I'll let you do the math.
Wow.
But what the message we hear, there's absolutely no conflict between science and scripture.
Absolutely. On wonders without number. And welcome back to the Genesis Science Report. Tonight, tuskless elephants. Once a rare sight, are now becoming more common in certain parts of Africa. Now, a recent study attributes this change to intense poaching pressure, framing it as a clear example of evolution in action. But is that really the case? Joining me in studio to take a closer look at the evidence is Dr. Randy Guliuzza, president of the Institute for Creation Research and a leading expert in biological design. Dr. Guliuzza is a medical doctor, engineer, and aerospace medicine specialist who's written extensively on the flaws in some of Darwinian thinking. Dr. Guliuzza, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I always love being on your programs.
It is an honor to have you here today to talk about these elephants in Mozambique. Can you tell me maybe a little bit about this new report and what it is suggesting?
Right, it's a recent report, just came out a few days ago, and it was Modern Proof of Evolution is how it was headlined there. And they began by saying what everybody knows is that you really can't see evolution in action. And they said most of the time it's supposedly a very slow, creak-along process, so glacially slow that nobody in their lifetime can ever see it. Of course, right there, that takes it out of the realm of science because it's never been observed.
Right. And of course, they're using this evidence. They said, well, the elephants of Mozambique, there's an increase in tuskless female elephants, and that's a clear representation of natural selection because the population has turned tuskless to sort of decrease the poaching activities, right?
Right. It reports on, unfortunately, a tragic case during a civil war in Mozambique where many of these creatures, not just elephants, were killed for their tusks or ivory or something that they could sell to fund their war efforts. But the percentage of tuskless females in the population dropped.
Yes.
The percentage of the tuskless females in the population actually increased because the ones with tusks dropped out of the population.
I gotcha.
So the tuskless ones before the poaching were about 18 to 20% of the population. But after the poaching of the ones with tusks, the percentage of the females without tusks in the population went up over 50 to 51% of the population, according to the report.
Okay, so could this be natural selection?
No, not even close.
Okay.
This shows how imprecise language can mislead a lot of people.
Yeah.
You have humans with a real brain really selecting against, in this case, those with tusks, because it's a selection against because they're killing them to get their tusks. So the point is that you have people with a real brain making real selections, making real choices, which, by the way, evolutionists call that artificial selection.
Right.
Yeah, they call that artificial. Something with a real brain
is artificial, and yet nature is the one with the mind that actually selects. How twisted can you get?
Totally twisted on that.
Okay, so the study emphasizes the role of human activity in driving evolutionary change. They do say that, oh yeah, hunters played a part, but they're not actually looking at it as if, well, you cull out all of the elephants with tusks, and it makes sense that the tuskless elephants will breed and produce more tuskless elephants.
That's right, exactly. It's not anything close to the passive process which Darwin was imagining. It's an active process just like any human breeder would do if you were selecting for a specific trait. Let's say you were breeding for cattle and you wanted more meat mass, or if you were breeding for horses and you wanted a faster speed, you're breeding for roses, you want a particular color. You have something with a real human brain, and they're actually selecting for these traits.
Okay, so when evolution is basically pushed, and it's being pushed like crazy. This agenda, this narrative for the last 150 years has saturated media. It's saturated the airwaves. Now it's even saturated children's books. It's saturated our kids' programming. It's saturated every college, every university campus when it comes to biology as the only possibility, the only way of thinking about it. So when you see something like this at work, and then when researchers begin to study it, they're only able to see evolution as a potential mechanism because that's the only option available. That's what they believe is the only option available to them as real scientists. Expound on that for a moment.
Well, you're talking about a mind saturation with a particular viewpoint that really constrains how you think, and since it's constraining how you think, it constrains what you actually see, even when you're not seeing what you are calling it. In this particular case, they're calling this selective event by human beings an instance of natural selection as they see it, because that's the only way they can really conceive of it in their mind, even though it's clearly a case of selective breeding, but you're just not breeding for the tusks in this particular case. So it's taken hold of the minds, and it affects how you see it, and it affects how you interpret, it affects how you explain things, and eventually, unfortunately, as you say, it'll even get into children's books, and they won't be able to interpret this event correctly. They'll still call it natural selection.
Right. Okay, but tell me, where is all of the new scientific data leading? A lot of it shows what appear to be design patterns, a lot of it shows complexity, and a lot of it shows this sort of framework of engineering when it comes to biology. Tell me, how should we be counteracting these negative effects of the agenda that's being pushed, and where should we take science?
Well, we need to actually go back towards an engineered basis of science, that when we look at creatures, we start to explain their functions in terms of basic engineering principles. In this particular case, this is just a case of selective breeding right here. This isn't natural selection, this is artificial selection, but many times you have to look very, very carefully, because creatures can change with environmental changes, and it has nothing to do with natural selection. It's an innate ability within them that they're able to track very carefully the environmental changes through innate sensors, innate programming, and output mechanisms which lead to responses which are so purposeful and so targeted to the change that they can even be predictable, and it's pointing to a highly engineered, highly regulated, innate mechanism which leads to adaptation.
Okay, when you talk about sensors inside of these animals, expound on that a little further.
Well, we have eyes, that's a sensor. We have ears, they're sensors. And these are the most obvious ones. They are gathering information. They're actually gathering data from the world around us. But we have pressure sensors. We have pain sensors. We have stretch sensors. We have sensors that can detect other microbes inside of us. We have literally thousands of different types of sensors which are sending information back to the organism or back to the cells, which then can be processed, leading to purposeful responses at the cellular level and all the way at the organism level.
Wow. But that is radically different than the idea that something outside, something within nature, it gets colder, and so therefore somehow the environment changes the creature.
That's right. It gets colder and you start to shiver.
Yeah.
And so the environment doesn't send a signal, some magical signal, even though you read this in scientific papers all the time. Yeah. It doesn't send a signal to you to start shivering. What actually happens is the temperature is what the temperature is. It's either hot or cold. Yeah. It is what it is. Your body detects that. Not only can it detect it, the information is sent inside, and it's going to compare to a set point. It's not only going to monitor the outside temp, but it's really monitoring your inside temp. It's comparing it to a set point that it wants to maintain, and then when it deviates from that outside a certain parameter, your body then will initiate a response, in this particular case, shivering, which is a way to generate heat to try to raise that internal temperature back to the set point.
So sensors detect a change, and then they generate the correct response to affect that change.
That's right.
Okay, let's talk about how quickly this can take place within an organism. Are we talking about something that is going to take several 100,000 years of generation after generation slowly adapting to those changes? Or is this something that happens more quickly?
More quickly, and the example I gave you is a physiological change, which everybody identifies with. But adaptation is really a spectrum that covers everything from rapid physiological changes to multi-generational changes, which also can be quite rapid. They can happen within a single generation. And we now know there are mechanisms which do not require changes to the genes themselves, but mechanisms which regulate the expression of those genes, even while a bird's still in the egg or a baby still developing inside its mother's womb. It's leading to changes of expression to genes and different traits that can happen within one generation, which then continue over multiple generations. So adaptation, physiologic to multi-generational.
Very, very interesting. Dr. Guliuzza, you were a part of a very large project, a video series called Made in His Image, which even relates the design and engineering of the human body of each and every single person watching this program right now to a designer. Can you tell me about this series?
Oh, that's a great devotional series. It really leads people to worship the Lord Jesus, and it talks about how we can maintain balance, even doing incredible athletic feats, the skills of our hands, how a baby can go from a water world inside of mom to an air world in a single breath, and the incredible capability of your eye to gather data that is processed at speeds which are just mind-boggling in terms of what computer engineers can do today. So it really points to the genius, wisdom, and power of the Lord Jesus.
And I have seen it extremely well produced, just a joy to watch, very educational, made in His image, exploring the complexities of the human body. ICR.org. Dr. Guliuzza, thank you so much for being here and addressing this today, and I'd love to have you back in the future as many, many more agenda-driven articles come out.
It'd be my pleasure.
All right. And thank you for joining us. We will be back after the break with more fascinating information on the Genesis Science Report. We know that you want to have a deep faith in the Lord and to witness to those around you. To do that, you need tools and information to strengthen your faith using scientific discoveries that prove the Bible to be true. The problem is that atheists using evolutionary theories claim that they've refuted the Bible's accuracy. What's worse, the real facts are censored. If you don't have a PhD in science, you're often left feeling helpless when trying to defend your faith. But you need to be equipped to know the truth. For that reason, over the past 13 years, we've become the most trusted name in biblical scientific research, interfacing with nearly every top Christian organization in existence to distill and give you the true facts as they support your faith in Christ. Sign up for our weekly emails and free bi-monthly magazine. Consider becoming a partner with us as we reach the world with the truth of the Bible and the gospel message. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Today on Wonders Without Number, I want to tell you there are some areas of history that we will go through where we will show you that the reason you are on earth at this moment is absolutely no coincidence.
So if William the Conqueror had not fathered Henry Beauclerk after surviving the Battle of Hastings, there would have been no George Washington, and America as we know it would not have happened.
On Wonders Without Number. Squids in limestone in the middle of the Grand Canyon.
But the big problem is how did those fossils get deposited in the middle of a 7-foot thick layer? According to the narrative, is something like 36 million years in duration. I'm replacing the narrative with some type of rapid smothering event.
On Wonders Without Number. Welcome back to the show. We are jumping into this week's Viewer Voices with a submission from Hadassah on Facebook, who says, "Thank you, David Rives Ministries. I love how you teach about the heavens and our world. You make the word very understandable." Hadassah, thank you so much for that note. We do try to make things understandable because guess what? If you can't actually break down science to where we can all understand it, then what you're really doing is you're speaking above everyone's heads, trying to build yourself up, but you're not accomplishing anything. What we want to do is we want to take those scientific aspects that most people can't even begin to understand, break them down not only to a layman level, to a level where pretty much anyone can understand easily and grasp the basic concepts, not the intricacies, but the basic concepts which are pointing us back to God's design. Now, our second testimonial comes from Champ on YouTube, who says, "Thank you, Jesus, and you dearly for this ministry. What an amazing calling to reteach people about the real truth, as opposed to the great atheistic indoctrination." Champ, love the way you put that. There is an indoctrination that's going on. Some of it is intentional, some of it is not intentional. Some of it is just intellectual atheism where it's become the vogue thing to do. But that's what we are fighting so hard, to represent the truth of God's creation, the truth of real science, and how it is all pointing us right back to a biblical foundation. Now, if our ministry has been a source of encouragement for you or a loved one, we would love to hear your story. So reach out to us on social media, or you can email us at comments@genesissciencenetwork.com. Up next, we're exploring a groundbreaking discovery that challenges conventional timelines. Soft tissue found in a T-Rex fossil that raises fascinating questions about our planet's history. Let's dive in on this week's Genesis Science Minute.
In 2005, Dr. Mary Schweitzer shocked the world when she published photos of an amazing discovery. Inside the fossilized femur of a T-Rex, supposedly 65 million years old, she and her team had discovered soft tissue, including red blood cells and collagen. Science has shown collagen can't last for even 1,000,000 years under ideal conditions. A big problem for secularists. The Bible gives us a timeline for these fossils that makes a lot more sense. These creatures were buried during the global flood of Noah's day, thousands, not millions of years ago. Some of those were buried so quickly and preserved so well that soft tissue still exists thousands of years later. Just one more scientific reason that you shouldn't believe in biological evolution. It takes a lot of faith. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
For more information, visit David Rives Ministries at davidrives.com. DavidRives.com.
This week on our ministry update, I'm excited to share some updates from here in the Nashville area. We recently hosted our friends from America's Gospel Music for an incredible 3-day filming event at the Wonder Center. This collaboration brought over 20 talented gospel artists together to share their gifts and to record their music. We are very grateful for our continued partnership with AGM and honored to support them in their mission to inspire and uplift through Christ-centered content. It was an amazing time. Now, speaking of partnerships, I wanted to highlight another ministry that we've been able to work with called Oak Plains Academy. Their organization is based in Clarksville, Tennessee, and their mission is to provide essential psychiatric treatment to teenagers grappling with behavioral issues, mental health, and substance abuse. It is truly a noble and necessary pursuit in today's world. I'm constantly reminded and grateful for all of the generous supporters who enable our ministry to then turn around and support these other organizations in the community while bringing a message of love and hope to these young people. Your prayers and support are the fuel that drives our mission to share the love of Christ and strive to educate, inspire, and uplift those around us. Your tax-deductible contributions allow us to continue this critical work. To learn more or to donate, visit davidrivesministries.org or call 931-212-7990. Now, it's time for a trip to the awe-inspiring site of Stonehenge. On this week's Heavens Declare, we are examining the significance of this iconic landmark and how it echoes humanity's ancient connection to the heavens. Let's take a look right now. I'm standing at Britain's most mysterious site, the ancient monument that we call Stonehenge. This ring of massive stones has puzzled archaeologists for centuries. Why was it built? How was it built? Who built it? Now, some people believe that it's an ancient sacred site built for religious worship, or maybe it's a burial ground. Others see it as a monument to the ancient unification of the peoples of Britain. But really, we don't know, because the people who built it aren't around to tell us. What we do know is that it is quite the feat of engineering. The biggest rocks are 30 feet tall, and they weigh in at over 25 tons. And get this, it appears that they were moved from about 20 miles away. Other smaller stones, and by smaller, I'm talking about they only weigh maybe 4 tons, well, those came from Wales 140 miles away. We still don't know for sure how these rocks were transported, but it's been suggested that maybe they were moved on a wooden trackway, a ship, or even by retreating glaciers. Standing here and looking at Stonehenge, it's a pretty incredible sight. I mean, the positioning of the rocks is actually so perfect that it lines up with the sunrise and the sunset at solstices. Now, that's some remarkable precision in engineering and a knowledge of astronomy. Think about it. That's led some people to speculate that maybe this site had something to do with astronomical signs, or maybe the worship of the heavens. Now, that wouldn't be surprising. I mean, throughout history, people have worshiped the heavens, the sun, the moon, and the stars, and Deuteronomy tells us that Israel was looking up at the heavens and worshiping what they see. You know, those celestial bodies, those are amazing created things given to us by God for days, signs, and seasons, and also they declare His glory and His majesty. But this rocky circle should really be thought of as a monument to ancient man and to his intelligence. You see, the evolutionary history taught at this site actually has it wrong. Our supposed Neolithic ancestors didn't build this. It would actually have to be after the languages were divided at Babel when this monument was erected, or whatever it is. You see, the earliest recorded humans were extremely intelligent, and they used their genius to make something that's stood the test of time, hasn't it? Some of the rocks here have now been set in concrete to keep them from collapsing. Even the most incredible human works will eventually start to crumble. But you know what won't ever crumble? That's God's Word. The Bible tells us that the grass withers and flowers, they fade away. But the Word of our God stands forever. I'm David Rives, on location at Stonehenge. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. That was fun. That was on a 1-week speaking tour in the UK. But it's amazing to see these kind of structures and to think that these ancient peoples had the technology to build things like Stonehenge. On the other side of the break, I will be joined by Dr. Tim Clarey for a deep dive into new geological research that has some evolutionists reconsidering their ideology. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm David Rives, and I'm inviting you to visit the Creation Superstore, the largest Origins-related store in the world. Not only will you find every book and video title on creation versus evolution, science, but also every resource that teaches us about our origin and how it all takes us back to Genesis, a grand designer, the God of the Bible, and ultimately, yes, the gospel message. Documentaries your family can trust, fossils, teaching videos, children's books, church Bible studies, homeschool supplements, and expert scientific literature. If you can't find a title, call us up and we'll add it. Normally, you'd have to visit dozens of sites to gain access to all of the titles that are out there, and then you would be at a loss to whether the book or video was worth the purchase. But not here. We've curated the best of the best into top 10 lists And on some of my favorite products, you'll find the Rives rating, where I help guide you on the best resources available for not only those who love history, biblical studies, and creation science, but also great products at the layman level, easy to understand for those who are learning or want their children and grandchildren to be exposed to a biblical worldview. Just look for the Rives rating to find my personal favorites. Use the search bar to look up a topic or follow our menu to sort by ministry, subject, or author. Give us a call at 931-212-7990 as you're browsing. We have ministry volunteers who will do their best to assist you at all hours of the day and even help you place your order. Yes, a real person. Get ready for a secure shopping experience brought to you by the leaders of creation-based research. Your purchase goes towards ministry outreach and also supports the authors and organizations who publish the material, most of whom are personal friends and colleagues of mine. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. And welcome back to the Genesis Science Report. Tonight we are taking a closer look at an intriguing geological discovery, specifically the age and origin of iron deposits known as banded iron formations, BIFs for short. Now these iron deposits, which were traditionally believed to be ancient relics from over 2 billion years ago, have recently been redated, which has scientists proposing, oh, well, maybe they might actually be 1 billion years younger. This revelation isn't surprising for those of us who adhere to the biblical account of creation, yet many secular scientists are now being compelled to reevaluate some of their evolutionary models in light of these findings. To help us break down this study and its significance, I'm joined by Dr. Tim Clarey, a respected geologist holding advanced degrees from Western Michigan University and the University of Wyoming. Now, with over 30 years of experience in research and education, Dr. Clarey now lends his expertise to the Institute for Creation Research. He's authored several books, including the comprehensive work Carved in Stone, Geological Evidence of the Worldwide Flood. By the way, I've read this cover to cover. An incredible work. It underscores his dedication to interpreting geological data from a biblical perspective. Dr. Clarey, it is great to have you on the show.
It's great to be here, David.
Listen, could you explain what banded iron formations, BIFs, are for us and talk a little bit about their significance in geological research?
Well, we often just call them BIFs in geology for the BIF, but they are an alternating layer. I have a piece right here from my home state of Michigan here with me. I don't know if you can see it very well on the camera, but it's layers of red jasper a lot of times, along with in between it's a silvery looking hematite. And so you see, layer after layer alternating between the jasper or the quartz rich component of the rock, almost like a chert or a flint, which is microcrystalline quartz, alternating with layers of hematite. And this has been in the argument for many, many years, many decades amongst conventional geologists trying to explain, this shows there's evidence that there was oxygen early in Earth's history to oxidize these minerals and to make those minerals red. So there's people that argue that the early Earth didn't have oxygen because you couldn't form life with the presence of oxygen the way they see it. And so this kind of contradicts that all along. So it's the BIFs, or the banded iron formations, are very interesting in their own right, and they're found on every continent. And so you can see them in North America, Africa, I know where you want, Australia. This particular study that we're going to talk about today is from Australia, but they're pretty common in some of these pre-Cambrian rocks before the traditional flood rocks. Maybe some of the early Earth's environments that was, God had some of these areas in the world where they were producing these layers of hematite and quartz-rich rock that had hematite in it. And so some of this is kind of a study that I'm not quite sure as a flood geologist where to go with explaining these, but these do appear to be some remnant of an early Earth environment that was forming. Definitely there was oxygen.
So how does secular scientists, again, typically explain the BIFs, the formation of these, and they're found all over?
Well, they have to argue that there's alternating layers where their early life on Earth was starting to produce these marine algae was starting to produce that. Somehow it formed, of course, on their own, that they were producing oxygen and photosynthesizing and producing oxygen. That oxygen would be sucked up by these rocks immediately. And so you get some layers that were oxidized, and then you go to the next layer that wasn't, and you get more oxygen. It was kind of an alternating theory. Some people even think this might have been on an annual cycle, but nobody really knows. But they kind of struggle trying to explain why you see this alternating pattern of minerals that have been oxidized, showing there's oxygen there and then not. And so they have different models, but none of them really explain the worldwide presence of these features and how prevalent they really are in some of these Precambrian rocks.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned that they're found in many different places. The study that we're looking at today was in Australia, but they've been observed other areas, other countries?
Right. Yeah, we have them in our own country here in North America. A lot of these have been mined for iron because they're very rich in iron. And so this is part of the resources that I believe God put in the earth for us to use, to extract, to make metals out of. So we still mine some of these banded iron formations in Minnesota and in Michigan, and some of these open pit mines, and around the world. And so they're very useful. They're not just an academic exercise. They've been actually, it's one of our main sources to make steel.
And I still have to get up to Michigan to do a little bit of rock hunting with you. I cannot wait to do that. This study, it says a billion-year shift in the formation of Earth's largest ore deposits. Now, Tim, let me just point out a couple of words here, because I'm reading through basically an abstract on this, and things that pop up are up to a billion years younger than previously, and now we come with fuzzy words and magic words. Estimated. They also appear to have formed within a geological time frame. It is thought that the trigger for this mineralizing event operated at this scale. All of these fuzzy words where it's almost like, well, hey, we don't really know, and we're having to completely rethink all of these scientific theories regarding banded iron formations. What do you think about that, Tim?
Well, I think it's typical of a lot of studies. It's surprising how honest they are in this case, in some regards, because they're showing that their previous studies, they always thought these banded iron formations in Australia were around 2 billion years old. In this case, they reassessed them, studying uranium lead, and they found out they're only about 1 billion years old, 1.1 to 1.4 billion years old. So they're almost a billion years younger than they thought. So now they're saying, well, there has to be 2 episodes of banded iron formation going on, 1 billion years ago, 2 billion years ago. But it to me, it shows the inaccuracies of age dating in general. It's another example of showing, if you do a study, you make completely different results from what previous, researchers have found. And that's more common than you're led to believe by the conventional science community.
Absolutely, and that's what good science should be all about. We should be intellectually honest enough to be able to talk about how some things are pointing us in directions that previously unknown. That's following new evidence, that's following new data. But at the same time, when you present all of the older evidence, the older theories as absolute fact, and then you're talking about 2 billion years, and then you find evidence to the contrary, it's like, well, maybe we should have been less specific about telling people that they were 2 billion years old in the past, and let's move to what modern scientific research is suggesting. Now, in your view, how do these BIFs fit into the creation flood model found in the biblical record?
Well, as I was trying to explain this earlier, I believe these are probably pre-flood environments between the creation and the flood. And there was some sort of special environment, special waters, and again, fairly common because it's found on almost every continent today that we know of. You get these alternating iron-rich waters, and there must have been some sort of a special environment that God created as part of his water cycle, or his pre-flood water cycle.
Okay.
And exactly how they fit in, and they've all been evidence of deformation. During the flood, these rocks have been folded and twisted and bent. And so I think there's a lot of evidence that during the flood, these rocks were affected and kind of cooked and squeezed, but they're still there. And so I think God really did, in his providence, left these exposures, these rocks exposed in enough places to help us to make metals like steel and things like that.
Absolutely.
But exactly how they, what the environment was, that needs to be a lot more study. needs to be done. I don't believe, of course, that these are billions of years old. I think these are just 6,000 years old. God probably created these special environments just like he created the environments for trilobites. What's odd is we often find these BIFs, these banded iron formation rocks, associated with other sedimentary rocks that are pre-flood. And with some of them have stromatolites and things in them, so there was evidence of algae going on. And stromatolites today are only found in a couple of locations. One is in Australia, where you have to have special water as well. So there is indications that the BIFs and the banded iron formations and these environments that produce these stromatolites so commonly in these pre-Cambrian rocks were part of a pre-flood environment that God created and had specially. We don't find many fossils in these, but we do find fossils nearby in other rocks. And so it's one of those things I still want to work on before I retire. I'm getting up in years, but I like to look at some of these things in a little more detail and really try to understand more about the pre-flood world from what God left behind. Even during the destruction of the flood, he left behind some remnants of the pre-flood world that we can study and try to understand.
Well, I'm expecting that to be in the updated and revised edition of Carved in Stone. We need that research. We need all of the research that you are doing. Again, when the study is using uranium lead dating, is that correct? So. And we realize the inconsistencies of some of these dating methods, especially radiometric dating methods, then we also realize that, well, just because they've backed it up 1 billion years doesn't mean that the more we study, it's going to be backed up another 1 billion years to fit solely in a 6,000-year timeline. It's the interpretation of the data that is inconsistent, not the data. The data that we're finding throughout geology, Tim, your research in mega sequences, your research throughout all of these models is consistently pointing us right back to historical events recorded in God's Word, meaning that it's true from the very beginning all the way to the very end. Tim, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing with us.
Well, thank you for the time.
Absolutely. I'm going to have you back in the future. And thank you for joining us on the Genesis Science Report. Until next time, I want you to keep looking up. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.